to the show, episode 4 of Not I Doubt It podcast.
No.
It is not. That was
Despite the library.
muscle memory. This is episode 4 of the John Adams podcast, reviewing the age-old, decades-old, or at least a decade and a half old miniseries from HBO that chronicled the life and career of John Adams. We are covering episode 4 of that particular miniseries today, entitled Reunion. I am Jesse Dollemore, your host, and I'm joined today by the lovely, talented, and scholarly Ian Brinksman.
We're pretty soon. I'm going to show up in a Britney wig, some glasses. I'll just sort of, I am. As I said last week, I'm mother, but I'm going to take over every part of her life. I'm going to start getting very scared of rats.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to, That's basically it. That's enough.
Well, you've lived in Washington, D.C. long enough that I think your fear has abated.
Yeah.
And Brittany's still afraid of unpredictable animals.
Yes. And disease-borne animals as well, I think, is high up on her list.
Plays a prominent role.
Yeah. I sort of am at this point now of just being in the muck and mire. I'm not going to lick the sidewalk, but I've done almost as bad.
In stuporous.
We don't need to talk about
all right.
it. We can push through. We can work through it. Yeah, no. Sweet boy Ian has never done anything bad.
That is, I believe that.
Thank you.
I actually, the rough and tumble, sometimes party-tastic life that I've led seems anathema to sweet boy Ian.
I've lived a life. I'll say that. We don't need to get into it. We can just leave it at that.
That's fine. I'm not probing.
No.
I'm not exploring that territory.
Yeah, look, I think that's why we get along. We've both made some mistakes, some larger ones than others, and but we're here. And you know who else made some mistakes? A little guy named John Adams.
Look at that. You're getting back. I mean, here we are. You are a previous podcast co-host on a little show called Save Us from the Johns.
Yes.
Which was a running critique of the show
Pod Save America.
Pod Save. Yes. I always call it Save
Pod
Us
Save
from
Johns.
the
Well, I mean that's because they're all named John, and that's not true, but it feels true.
I think it's still up and running.
It is.
It's not new episodes, but someone could go back through your catalog.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and their show for sure is still running.
Yes.
It's a multi-million-dollar media conglomerate now.
It's a fun listen to because towards the end, my life falls apart. My personal life falls apart. And to say that it bleeds into the show is an extreme understatement. So you can kind of track where my mental health is in real time and see its deterioration. It's a fun listen.
Available wherever you find podcasts. Mm-hmm. So this particular podcast that we're doing, Sweet Boy Ian. By the way, where can people find you on the Twitter?
You can find all my very sweet replies at Team Ian. I only have nice things to say to various people. I never get in trouble on there.
Right.
Never get blocked. Only like fun little spoofs and goofs.
Spoofs and goofs. Mm-hmm. I am not even as active as I used to be, so it doesn't even matter.
No, me neither.
So episode 4, Ian, we talked about episode 3 last time. There's no need to really give a recap, but it was John Adams in France and the Netherlands, and the stark and rapid juxtaposition between Abigail Adams, his wife, back in Massachusetts, toiling over the homestead, and then John Adams failing as a diplomat in
failing
France.
At everything.
Right.
Failing at being upright. He was not in a good place when we last saw our hero.
And this episode is entitled Reunion, really hammering home that I was correct about their pretty ham-fisted juxtaposition, cutting back and forth, because now this is Reunion, and it opens, I guess the whole episode, we should kind of give a rundown, is really John Adams and the reunion between he and Abigail Adams, and then some goings-on in France, and then it ends with him in Great Britain having been appointed, and there's some words in here that I want to... Do they even still use some of these words? The plenipotentiary Is that a word they still use at state?
No, I don't think so. I think that is out of. I think that's in someone's court. I think. So I think that is out. But we talked about this a little bit. French is still the official diplomatic language, technically.
Kind of like English is the language for science.
Right, exactly. So if you look at any passport now, it'll be in French as well. So you pull out your American passport, you'll see it's in Spanish, English, and French.
That's interesting.
Yeah. The other thing I like is, and we're going to get into this in detail, but I thought Reunion was a cheeky little title.
Yeah.
Cheeky little title.
Yeah, it doesn't take long for the reunion to begin.
No.
For sure. But it opens where we left off with John Adams in the Netherlands on his deathbed, because that's where the episode ended on episode 3, is him like this weird cliffhanger, like we don't know the answer that he's going to survive.
Yeah.
But they leave it really like he's going through it sick, and they show him, and a dude shows up, some aide or assistant or whatever he may be, secretary, and he shows up. It says, "Momentous news, Mr. Adams. We've won the revolution."
Yeah.
And for me, this was an emotional scene, not just because of how Giamatti geniusly played it, but also just the writing. They're really painting the exhaustion and how much work he had been doing, what was weighing on his mind, because he immediately breaks down and like cradles his own head on the back of the hand of the secretary dude.
Yeah.
And like kissing or just, it was just,
and this
collapsed.
This is so out of character for him, because he's not an affectionate man,
Right.
especially to other men.
Right.
Like, this is not his time in France has not really affected him in that way. But you're right; he was so overcome by emotion that, he even seemed to get a little better. To wit, do we know what he was sick with? I was trying to figure that out.
There have been multiple. Nobody knows, because like we can only make judgments based on his symptoms, so we don't know. But it could have been yellow fever or some other
just some
seasonal.
Yes, something that we're glad isn't around anymore.
Well, and this has been a theme, stuff we've talked about, that when they show people in closed quarters, like none of his windows are open, like he's just in this closed up little house, breathing in recycled sick air.
He's probably been bled multiple times at this point.
Yeah, this is pre-germ theory. They don't know anything about washing their fucking hands or anything.
Right, that too. Yeah, they don't. That's another 60 years from now. So, yeah, not great.
So as a storytelling device, like you said, maybe it did buoy his spirits or whatever, but he got over it real quick, because the very next scene is him securing that loan he tried to secure in the previous episode.
Yep.
Them saying yes to $2 million American. It was like 5 million Dutch guilders or whatever at the time, for not for the war cause, but to establish American credit. And it's great because they really tie into who John Adams is and how he's seen by others, with this Dutch official who says, "You're a most stubborn man, Mr. Adams," to which John Adams and Paul Giamatti, again,
I think this was
brilliant.
He's been brilliant throughout, but I think this is his best performance I've seen, because in a lot of the other episodes, there are points where there are other people who shine a little brighter.
Sure.
But this one, I think, was really tour de force, like, because it showed every aspect of Adam's personality really well throughout, like his humbleness, his emotionality, his viciousness,
his vanity, his jealousness.
Yeah.
That comes in.
All of it. So totally agree with you there too. And another thing I liked about the scene, and I don't think it's intentional, but I really liked it historically, it kind of foreshadows him being a Federalist, right?
Oh, I wrote that in here somewhere.
Okay, yeah.
Because they have he and Thomas Jefferson, we're going to get there.
Well, that part's for
they
sure.
They directly
Yeah.
have a conversation and a mild disagreement
Yes.
where they banter back and forth.
Yes, but I mean, just the whole, like, he's happy that the U.S. finally has, it's established a line of credit, which is another way of saying debt.
Right.
Which is going to be just the defining thing for the next, 30 years.
Which absolutely, and also does not even go as deep as not this episode, but this series does go in conversations between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson about the establishment of the bank and buying up the debt from the states. So then the central bank, we're getting a little in the weeds, but absolutely, it's a nod to federalism.
Yeah, it's becoming a European style power.
Yeah,
which spoiler, TJ did not want, to say the least.
One more horror visited upon the world through gingers. So it is interesting, though, that John Adams does agree with the stubbornness statement. And he says, thanks to God, he gave me stubbornness, especially when I know that I am right.
Yeah.
And the Dutch people, like, he is beaming like, yes, you're right, I am.
Yeah.
And which also is not a good mark of a diplomat, of someone in the diplomatic corps, to be super stubborn and set in their ways and forcing their particular opinion on others.
He's lucky that the Dutch, we talked a little bit last week, but the Dutch and he seem more eye to eye, sort of in terms of aesthetics and
more recalcitrant.
Yeah, recalcitrant. Yeah, that sort of stern Protestantism, I think, speaks to Mr. Adams a bit.
So they cut to France. The year is 1784. John Adams, just for the audience's edification, is 49 years old at this time.
Spry 49.
Yeah, 50 is old. 50 is much older in 1784 than it is in 2024.
Yep.
And there's a voiceover of a letter from John Adams to Abigail Adams as she's riding in on a carriage, and he's saying that he's asking her to come to France to be with him, and he keeps using this phrase, to my dearest friend, my dear friend. Mm-hmm. That's really how they corresponded with one another in their letters, is they called each other my dear friend. Yeah,
it's very asexual. Reminds me a bit of like Nixon calling Pat buddy. That's what I kept thinking about.
Or Clarence, a more recent and timely is Clarence Thomas referring to Jenny Thomas as my best friend. There are a couple of weirdos like that too, which I don't think is weird. Brittany Page is my best friend and my wife.
Sure.
But it was a more romantic time.
I hang out with you too. You're not like, oh, what's up, pal, and give her like a noogie. Like it is a much more
elbow, nudge.
It's a much more, I would say, like traditional husband wife kind of way that you two interact versus our more repressed boys.
I am not repressed.
No, you are not.
So Abigail Adams is on this fancy carriage pulling up to the fancy-ass mansion. Mm-hmm. She is kind of in awe of the opulence and the ostentatiousness of the entire thing. And then there are when she gets off the carriage, he's there to meet her. There's a slew of servants and house staff, whatever you want to call them. And there's a very weird, speaking of formality, a really weird formal introduction, like reintroduction of this husband and wife in front of the staff.
They reintroduce, buddy.
And it's hello, Mrs. Adams. Hello, Mr. Adams. And they're not being cute or cheeky.
No.
It's awkward.
Yeah. You can tell it's a type of formality that they almost, it's rehearsed, I would say.
Because if you listen to last episode or you watched last episode on YouTube, you did see that there was coldness because he had not been writing her. I don't think it was no letters, but it was certainly very sporadic.
Yeah. And
this was under her skin based on all of the scenes that we saw of her toiling over, making sure the house was clean and being quote unquote neurotic or compulsive and fixated and really bothered by his lack of communication.
Yeah.
So he gives her like a very cursory, not a detailed tour of the place.
He had some things on his mind. He had a specific room I think he wanted to end up in.
Why don't you take it away?
Oh boy.
Sweet boy Ian.
So, audience, I hope you're enjoying this miniseries. And like me, you're probably like, when I see Paul Giamatti, I see a man who is so powerful, is so beautiful. I need to see what it looks like when he has sex. And I need to see it in the most poorly lit, gross way imaginable. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
So there was a sex scene between John and Abigail Adams.
Yes.
I am not one of those people who's like, there shouldn't be sex scenes. Or like, I'm also not one of those people who's like, what is the point of a sex scene? It's gratuitous. I think there are many times when sex scenes are important.
Yeah. I believe it. It's not all. I think too often in modern entertainment, it is gratuitous.
It can be.
It can be Game of Thrones levels of gratuitous.
Yeah.
This certainly wasn't that.
No, but that's my question to you. my intrepid co-host, what do you think the point was of that sex scene? I have some thoughts, but I'd be curious if you. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. The point would be I think to show that they really were. There is this physical connection between them. It's not this formal. The accusations that were leveled against Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton back in the 90s, that it's a marriage of convenience or station, that they're not really in love. They are in love.
Yeah.
And he's immediately regrets. He's a crier. I'm getting fucking weird, emotional all the time. He's an emotional guy. There's many times throughout the series, from episode 1 through 3, where he gets his chin quiver and he's getting emotional. And I think he's just overcome with regret for having not written her. And he starts tugging at her dress, taking her gloves off, and getting to it.
It gets very animalistic very fast.
I mean, he even dips his head down toward, like, kissing her legs into her giant, billowy, freakish
I do think
obstruction, obstacle course of a dress.
I think that was part. So the sex scene is so long in part because they have to take off the very complicated doodads and various things. I think that's part of it.
Well, I don't think he really even takes a lot off. He just gets to getting.
No, he does get to getting, but it still takes a while to get to the getting. He's still putting the work in.
They do the cinema trick where they don't really indicate how long they were going at it, but by the end of it, she's red from like stubble burn all over her neck and face.
I thought you had a theory about how long.
I have no idea.
We had.
So what are your thoughts? I don't know what it's supposed to convey.
So I think part of it was just how long it takes to actually disrobe and all that stuff. And there's sort of that. There's an absurdity here with like we're seeing all this pomp and circumstance, and we're seeing all this like. She's wearing like 80 layers of shit, and it's like at the end of the day they're just like animals like everyone else.
Yes.
I think another part of it
just fucking hairless apes with clothes on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's part of it too, is like to demystify the founding father. It's like he is going to be there are times where most of the presidents are horned up. I have a list of presidents who I don't think ever got horny. Nixon's high on that list, but
maybe Abraham Lincoln, or at least not for women.
Not for women. Yeah.
Which is fucking right on. Do your deal, eh?
Yeah, no, for sure. Who's the? Oh man,
what's that?
There's one president that was almost certainly gay and had a male lover the entire time. But who was it? I think it was Buchanan. But he's been
pre-Lincoln.
It's already been like it's like his friend that he's lived with this entire time.
Huh.
But like I don't want to say it's Buchanan because that guy's already been pulled through the mud a lot. I'll look into it.
Yes.
I'll look into it.
All right, well, we'll save that. We'll write a note.
Yeah.
For next episode.
Other gay president.
Yeah, we'll clear that matter out.
But I think, so I think part of it was showing the absurdity, humanizing, showing, even John Adams is going to get horned up. And I think your point is well taken, that it's like at 50 years old in like the late 1700s, he's still so into her and still so passionate with her. He will still be like a 14-year-old boy. Yeah, and
I think some of the dialogue really speaks to some of the questions you have. Because she says, after it's over, after they have sex, speaking in a weird passive fashion here, that I came here with many harsh words for you. Like I was pissed off.
Yeah.
And it kind of all melted away, seeing that you do love me and you do care about me. And he says in this very 18th century, my pen was silent, not because you were absent from my thoughts, but because you were too much in them. A little bit of a cop-out line, I think, because if you really wanted to write her, you would have written her. Yeah. I don't think you're that. Your pen is silent, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
But then he goes into why he didn't write her, of his own words to his wife, and that he says, to write of my disgrace and my burden with you, and burden you with my trials here, knowing all of those you had to face at home alone. I didn't want to tell you all about all of my failures and the shitty things that I'd been failing left and right. It was a bad time for me, and I don't want to share that with you.
And you got to assume that's from his diary, the real John Adams diary, something like that. Because when these filmmakers don't tend to insert themselves into what he's thinking without some sort of source material.
Most certainly. Also, that's really poetic to be spoken word.
Yes.
You know, that's
100,
that's kind of stuff. But then she says to him, do you think I would think less of you if you spoke of your misadventures here? And I love the next line. I got emotional when I heard him say it. I'm getting emotional inside now, where he says, no man wants to appear a fool before his wife. So maybe it was just that easy, that it was just he felt fucking embarrassed and maybe emasculated to a degree.
Yeah.
Not being able to accomplish that which he was set to by the Congress to do, and he ended up getting fired.
Yeah, no, he did not do. Yeah,
he took a lot of fucking L's.
He had reasons to be embarrassed.
Yeah,
for sure. So that was what we proposed last week, and yeah, I agree.
So next scene, cut to John Adams having a conversation with Thomas Jefferson.
Love
and
this scene.
In so many words, they are discussing federalism.
Mm-hmm.
This is the quote that gets talked about by libertarians and psychopaths all over the place, where where Jefferson is discussing, and this is something he did believe, maybe less so in his later years, but that one generation. It's arrogant for one generation to put upon the next their form of governance and how they want to run things.
I mean, I kind of believe that.
Sure.
Right? Like, I mean,
there's some sense to it.
I mean, that's the real problem with the Constitution now. It's too fucking hard to change.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're still stuck with shit from, the 1700s, pre-germ theory.
Well, it's why we have a little plug for merch here. We've got merch that says, I don't care what the founding fathers said.
Yeah.
I'll throw a picture up here. And people get bothered by that. And it's not that I don't care what I think they were not smart or whatever. It's why should we spend so much energy justifying an 18th century worldview on ourselves just because the vast majority of our founding fathers were enslavers of human beings?
Yeah.
Like, who cares what they
also,
thought?
I don't think the people who make, like, the originalists, I don't think they actually fucking care. I just think they use it as a convenient excuse to be like, well, we can't make these changes because of original intent or whatever bullshit. Yeah, it just so happens that material helps me and my political party or my bottom line economically. That's besides the point. I just read the original documents.
And then they really get to it because they're talking about federalism without saying, I mean, I don't know that they even use that word that often in the beginning, but he's talking about how they're trying to get other nations to recognize them and negotiate with them and trade with them and enter into treaties with them and agreements, economic and otherwise. And John Adams said something that's just brilliant. He goes, as long as they are dealing with 13 separate states, they can afford to procrastinate on all of these agreements to come in with us. It's going to benefit us to be a federalist, European-style government.
So maybe that's a good like a real quick explanation of federalism and what would we call Jeffersonianism, I guess, or
sure.
But like the Federalist.
Well, there was the Anti-Federalist Papers that were written as a counterpoint to the Federalist Papers. Yeah,
but basically Jesse said it really well that federalism is about creating a European-style country with a.
I stole that from you from earlier in the episode. So
did you? Oh well, regardless, look how smart we both are.
So you're complimenting yourself. Good job.
Yeah. Good cribbing, dude. No, but it's with a stronger central government, taking on national debt, kind of with a stronger figurehead. Whereas Jefferson believed in the yeoman, this idea that these farmers could go out, be self-sufficient, have worked the land, use the land, get everything they need from it, trade with each other, and everything will work out great.
Like an agrarian existence to the nth degree.
Unsaid in all that is the assumption that everyone's going to need slaves. Like, that's the only way that'll work.
Yeah, even though at the same time he's writing that it's an evil, that it's an immoral practice.
And part of the reason he did Louisiana Purchase, spoiler alert.
Yeah, not a Federalist position.
Not a Federalist position. Part of the reason he did it was because we already were running out of land at that point. It's like, okay, we need all this infinite land for our yeomen so they can have their farms.
That's right. Yeah, it is. There are a lot of contradictions. We act like, looking back, that most of our founding fathers were just moored in their principles, and they were immovable objects against their righteous morals. No, they weren't. Even Thomas Jefferson, who was among the most strident in his Jeffersonian democratic principles, was a hypocrite.
Oh yeah, he sent the Marines.
Yeah.
Right. This guy who hated federal authority.
Treaty of Tripoli.
Yeah, sent the Marines to the Barbary Coast. Like these people are
the Barbary Coast in the Mediterranean. Not even in the Caribbean.
No, yeah, it's not
across
close.
the Atlantic.
Yeah. He let Congress know when it was a little too late too.
So it's in this meeting that actually John Adams gets to meet, or Abigail Adams is introduced to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
And
I love this scene. I adore this scene.
It is really good because I think Thomas Jefferson, they're starting to show, and I don't know how early the rift started between Jefferson and Adams. They were great friends. They ended up having a fallout for years and years and years, and then ended up great friends again. To which, and it might be apocryphal, one of their last words was about the other on their deathbeds. And they died on July 4th, 1826, I think, within hours of one another. Yeah. But Jefferson, I like this scene because Jefferson seems to admire Abigail Adams for some of the qualities that don't exist in John Adams. Like, she is diplomatic in the conversation they're having about what she thinks of the French and what she thinks of what's been going on, and she gives an answer that's not just putting them on blast.
Yeah, and she comes off as a little more bohemian than Adams, right? Just like a little more. There's a playfulness to how Abigail and the way Jefferson is speaking there. There's almost a flirtation that begins between the two of them.
Yes.
Which I like how Jefferson.
Stannis Baratheon.
I like how he plays it because he still has that sort of effete quality. Like, he still has like a slightly kind of almost gay-coded quality to it.
Very soft-spoken too. Yeah.
But like flirtatious and like has some game. Right? You can picture Jefferson like, oh yeah, he can chat up some women pretty well.
I had this thought when I was watching, and I wanted to ask you about it. What do you think the preparation? Neither of us fucking know at all. So we're stabbing in the dark here. But how do you think a Brit, Baratheon? I didn't print the names of the cast like I usually do. How do you think they prepared him? Because he doesn't intimately know the background of Thomas Jefferson. Yeah. He's a British guy.
So I can't speak to him, but I did look up. Tom, the actor who plays. Why can't I think of his last name? The actor who played Ben Franklin, Tom Wilkinson. Yeah, Tom Wilkinson. And because I was kind of curious about that because he brought a southwestern English accent to Franklin. Like, was that how Franklin talked? I don't know. And he was interviewed about it. He's like, well, no, the director was just like, use whatever accent you feel like using. That's because they're gonna all have different accents.
Yeah, why not look it up? I mean, we know, we know about what Daniel Day-Lewis, the absolute king of acting. Yeah, my absolute favorite. He did a lot of research on Abraham Lincoln's voice, and he did have a higher pitched, raspy kind of voice that many people claim that it's very likely Daniel Day-Lewis got right.
Yeah, as right as you could be without any. There was no recording of Lincoln's voice, so everyone was shocked at how high register his voice was. So,
but they can go back and look and see from where his ancestors hailed. He also was educated in England.
Benjamin Franklin. Franklin. Oh,
Franklin. So we'd be able to tell a little bit.
But it's also complicated too because
it's not dealer's choice.
Well, it's also complicated too because English accents as we know them now are modern. Because it's called received pronunciation. Sometime in the 1800s, they just all decided to change their accent. So apparently American accents are a little bit closer to English accents prior to the 1800s.
So it's kind of like no one really spoke in the transatlantic accent for real. It was just like a broadcasting thing. But we kind of went away from that nearing the same time that they were taking on the other affectation.
I guess then, how we talk is a little closer to how a modern British person would talk. So to answer your question, bit of a free-for-all. I think he did look up. I don't think he came out of nowhere just playing Jefferson a little a little like a feat because everything we've read about Jefferson has implied that very heavily.
But also like the quietness and the depression and he had to have been instructed or did some deep dive research.
I think he did. Yeah, I mean, all these guys. I haven't looked up Stannis particularly, but Franklin, I know for a fact Tom Wilkinson did a little bit of research. And
yeah. Well, they cut from that scene of them meeting to Abigail Adams and actually Jefferson that he's actually sashaying down this gravel path with these opulent trees all over, like you would see in a French garden or a British garden.
Yeah, and sashaying is the perfect verb.
And he's got his little cane, and he's in his fancy silk outfit.
He is laying it on like villain thick, but again. But this is what I mean about the bohemianness, because he's talking to her about the theater, and at first she's trying to pretend like she was aghast by it because it was like quasi-sexual, and then he kind of prods her more. It's like, it sounds like you kind of liked it, and she's like, I did, I really did.
And then they cut to John Adams trying to read a book, and Abigail Adams in the room having her hair brushed out by a servant. She seems very at home, by the way, in it, but then she rejects or protests a little. I can comb my own hair.
She's liking France.
Yeah.
She likes France.
I think so too.
In the same way Jefferson likes France.
And this is where the jealousy that you mentioned earlier comes out, because she starts, I mean, there's no other way to, she's fucking with him a little bit.
Yeah.
Fucking with John Adams.
Intentionally.
And she says, for all of Mr. Jefferson's sadness, there's a great charm about him.
Mm-hmm.
And John Adams, bothered to look up from his book, says, you find him captivating, And she says, he is exceptional. And then he goes, am I not exceptional in any way? Like the jealousy really rears up his head and shows what's going on inside him.
Which was the exact reaction she was hoping for.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So, again, a lot of these cut scenes, they're trying to cover a lot of ground in this episode.
Yeah, I actually had some trouble with the pacing in this episode.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
I didn't like it either. It's the series as a whole, pacing, I think, can be an issue at times, and especially as we get to the later episodes, which we'll talk about when...
Because I think they're just frenetically trying to cram so much in. I mean, John Adams lived to be like 90 plus.
Yeah, and
they had to cram so much in.
And they to this production's credit, they don't do the typical biopic formula. A typical biopic formula is like, we'll start out showing them a kind of rags, then a meteoric rise, then they hit some kind of problem, they fall, but then they rise again, end scene, right? And they're really good in this series, and I think it's going to be really pronounced in the last episode, but they're very good at showing everything about a person's life.
Yeah.
And, there's a reason why Bohemian Rhapsody didn't end with Freddie Mercury with AIDS in his bed.
Yeah.
But
triumphant,
right? Yeah. And they're eschewing that formula here, which is very brave and very cool, but also I think it does show some issues sometimes with pacing and storytelling.
Sure. This next scene is the whole crew. Got Ben Franklin. It's them again on the veranda or whatever area, whether you're having lunch or whatever, on the fancy mansion patio.
His gout is just out of control at this moment.
Yeah. There's some great moments in this scene, too. Yeah. And Benjamin Franklin with the old French lady with the powdered white face shows up, and he says, I have something very important to deliver. And it ends up being a letter. We'll just spoiler alert it now. It ends up being a letter naming John Adams to be the sole... diplomat to Great Britain. Apparently, they haven't given up on. Is this the letter? Am I wrong about this?
No, I think you're right. You're right.
Yeah, okay, cool. Because the next scene they talk about him being appointed to the position.
Yeah.
But Ben Franklin, when he's sitting down because his gout is bad or whatever, he sits down. Apparently, he has long balls because he must sit on his nuts or something.
Oh yeah.
And he grimaces and he goes, "Ugh, my stones," and then realizes that Abigail Adams is there and doesn't stand up, and then because he's mortified of the faux pas, then he stands up and apologizes for not being able to stand up.
Yeah.
But he's talking about his nuts in front of other people's wives and shit.
Yeah, that's happening. That little shitty dog that woman is holding just, I guess, pisses on her at some point.
Shits all over her. I wrote it down.
Yeah.
I said, Well, I wanted to ask you. I said, the old lady's puppy she's carrying shits on her, ? What is the meaning of this? Like, what do you think that means? They're not just doing it because, oh, we need some action here. Yeah, have the dog shit on her.
I mean, I think part of it is to go just kind of another little knife twist in the decadence of the French court right before the Revolution, right? Like, just really showing that these people need to go.
I think that could be right.
Yeah, that's how I interpret it anyway.
But there's also that moment where the French lady says in broken English, Mr. Franklin has asked me to marry him many times.
Oh, yeah.
And to Abigail, and Abigail says, has he indeed? An inconvenience to Mrs. Franklin, surely.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was a great line.
Because Benjamin Franklin was out in France whoring around. He's got a family, maybe multiple families back in the States, and he's going crazy. He didn't seem happy that she said that back.
No, he did not. He did not. He was what? How old was he at this point? Like 80 in the 1700s? He was old. Like old by today's standards too.
Yeah, I think he was like probably 73.
73.
I think he was born in 1735, and this is 1784. So do the math.
Okay.
I mean, he's like 73 years old.
73 years old. Okay.
74.
Yeah. Gout filled, can barely stand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet he's still like laying pipe, and I just don't. I don't get it. I respect it. I don't get it.
Right. So
I mean, like, I don't
crooked pipe, but
crooked pipe. I can't imagine how gross, how just syphilitic all of that was. And I'm not saying I respect it. Like, I obviously don't respect cheating on your wife or anything like that. But I simply respect the game.
Well, I think it probably only could have taken place in France. Like, it was what a blessing for Benjamin Franklin to be in France during that time, right before the fall of the empire, the court.
And I got to imagine too, because it wasn't France was obviously the most decadent and the most like libertine in the like in the orgies that they have at court and stuff like that. But the upper class has always been like weird about multiple sexual partners, like. They all have mistresses. They all have concubines. They're also like Franklin. Yes, like that's Franklin. That's Franklin after dark. But as an American aristocrat, he was still like he and his fellow cohort were having plenty of affairs.
Sure. So the next scene they cut to is just the gentlemen out there,
just the fellas.
Benjamin Franklin. Also some of the worst shot. What in the hell are they doing? I will show them here.
Oh, yeah.
Ridiculous, where it's Benjamin Franklin on the far right side of the screen, and then the whole left side is just like scenery. Like, they're not the composition of these shots. There must be a reason behind it.
I didn't want to cut you off, but I was going to say at the very opening scene when he was dying, I was like, that was the first time that the Dutch angle made sense to me. Like, it's like, oh yeah, you're dying. This is when you use this.
You want to throw the audience off.
Yeah.
This is obviously uncomfortable.
But no, let's do it in a nice garden scene too. That makes
weird. I mean,
in a sunny.
There is a creative choice. It's not an accident. It's not like they have a rookie in there. This is by design.
Yes, but he might just think it looks cool.
I guess.
I mean, like, that could be, it doesn't have to be intellectualized. It could just be, I mean, again.
So this is a funny scene between Thomas Jefferson, or between Ben Franklin and John Adams, where Benjamin Franklin says, look, we've had our disagreements in the past for sure. And they're discussing him being appointed, John Adams being appointed the sole diplomat, the minister to the court of St. James. And he says, we've had our disagreements, but you've always been an honest collaborator. I can think of no better choice to represent the United States and Great Britain than yourself. And then he gets a little jab in there. He says, the English love a good insult. So like him being appointed is an insult to the king because he's so bad at diplomacy.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't take it like that. I took it more like, oh, the way you talk is insulting, so the English are going to kind of enjoy you.
I think both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think, actually, I agree with this, going back to, like, who is better suited for what. Like, Jefferson is way better suited for France, for all the reasons we talked about. And Adams, he makes sense in an English court. It's just a bunch of, again, fellow Northern European, like, staid Protestants. Like, that is...
values tradition.
Yes. And also just, like, and an insult. Like, that is how the British love being humiliated. That is what they get off on. So, My dad was English. I can say this.
So
I have special insight.
So not English, not of English descent. Born in England.
Born in England.
Englishman.
Born in England. Yes. Well, he's from the north, so they don't really call themselves Englishmen.
Oh, is that an insult?
It's not an insult, but when you think of an Englishman, you think of someone who's from the south, who has like a very proper way of speaking, is a gentleman.
Working class roots.
My dad was very working class. Yeah.
So it's announced that Ben Franklin is going to be gone. He's going to have to go back to the States, I guess, and Thomas Jefferson is going to take his place. And Thomas Jefferson says that I expect that because they're talking about going back to go to the Constitutional Convention to help write the Constitution. And he says, I expect that any constitutional document that emerges will be as compromised as our Declaration of Independency. Because remember how hurt he was.
He was very butthurt
over the editing process.
Yeah.
Remember the Hatter story that was conveyed. Yeah.
He's also right here. I mean, that is true.
Sure.
He was extremely compromised.
Yeah.
Literally, there was a couple compromises in there that were not great.
Right. Well, surrounding the same stuff that was cut from the Declaration of Independence itself. So they cut to this balloon flight. I don't have a lot to say. I think it really just serves the purpose that things were changing, that some technology was starting to change, and this is like the very beginning of what would be the Industrial Revolution.
The age of reason. Yeah, we're getting past our old ways of superstition, and what could be more modern than America, and what could be more modern than representative democracy.
And also, they really do a good job of painting. Well, they really paint Thomas Jefferson in a good light, who's optimistic about this. And John Adams is poo-pooing the thing the whole time. He's like, this fucking thing's never leaving the air. This thing's never going to work. It's not going to work. And then it works. They're really, it's a statement about him, too.
Yeah, and Abigail was, again, kind of more in the Jefferson camp. You could tell that she was delighted and sort of overcome with the whimsy of it.
Yeah, sure. And then they cut to John Adams and Abigail Adams in Great Britain, and he's being fitted for clothes, he's being trained on how to greet the king.
The three bows.
He's going to have an audience with the king, and it is the pomp and circumstance and just the ceremony that makes me sick. I'm not a fan of the royal deal.
Neither am I. Going back to my dad grew up as a small R Republican. Like, he was anti-monarchist in the UK. So he always was anti-monarchy, hated Charles, always hated. So I grew up in an anti-monarchist household. I put that pin in there as I say the following. I love, as part of this, seeing the various hatreds you have of things that don't exist anymore. Like, it's been very fun for me. Like, you got mad at that South Carolina delegate.
Yeah.
You got mad at the French court. You're mad at the English court. Rutledge, that's it.
John Rutledge.
Like, it's been a very fun, just like subplot, just watching you emotionally react to these things.
Yeah, well, I think it's an impediment.
Yeah.
And the monarchy still does exist. I mean, not in this particular form, but certainly when you meet King Charles, it's not a situation where, I mean, you probably aren't supposed to turn your back on him and shit like that.
No, they do that same bullshit. You still do the bows and...
I'm for equality. I'm an egalitarian, man.
Yeah, and
what's so special about him other than his freakish sausage fingers?
Yeah. Oh God, Jesse sent us a picture of the sausage fingers in the group chat, and I do not enjoy that. I don't like body horror, so I really don't like that. No, but you're right. I mean, and it's not like this family has been fucking anything other than just they had a Nazi problem.
Yeah.
That just,
to say the least.
It wasn't just the king that abdicated. It's like all of them were basically like, even
Churchill had a Nazi problem.
Churchill, yes. Churchill.
Let's not forget.
Yeah, Churchill had some problems for sure. Yeah. So like, but the actual like royals were like, including Prince Philip, were like, we kind of the wrong side won.
Yeah. So he's being fitted, and the guy he's being trained, and the guy who's training him says, it might not hurt to get some new clothes, bro. He's like, what do you mean? What's wrong with this? He goes, well, maybe something a little bit more English,
You know what's crazy about that? And I rewinded and forwarded. I couldn't tell the fucking difference. Could you? Like,
for sure.
What was the big difference?
The French, they wear a lot of silk, and it was all shiny.
Okay.
Like, remember Jefferson when he was sashaying?
Yeah.
That's like a silken, shiny, fancy. And then British is more dour and serious.
Oh, interesting. See, I thought he was wearing American clothes, and that's why they said that. But I
guess
guess he was
just
wearing
come
French.
from
Yeah,
France,
right. That makes
living in
sense. No,
France.
that makes total sense. That makes total sense.
So really, and not even like exactly what the differences are. They could tell you're wearing French clothes, bro. I mean, from a it's not bad advice.
Yeah, no,
and it's not like you have to dress exactly like the British. You could dress American, but you certainly don't want to go in dressed like the arch enemy of the United Kingdom.
They just fought 2 wars.
Yes.
They're about to fight another 7.
And he seemed bothered by it, but he took the advice. He shows up in the court, and it's one of the scenes that's rare for John Adams, where he seems genuinely nervous and rocked by the immensity of the situation.
It's like your first day of school, you're the new kid, and everyone is staring at you.
Yeah, the president of the United States is your teacher.
Right.
Because he's meeting King George for the very first time.
And he enters the court first with all the various nobles and lords and shit, and they're all standing there stunned looking at him.
Because they scream his name when he walks in.
Yeah.
Mr. John Adams! And then he comes walking in.
He would have been a great crier back in the day. That would have been such a good... That would have been a good job for you.
Oh yeah!
That's... I always think about that, what job I would have back in the day, and I've never really come up with a good one. But
manager of an abattoir. What's an
abattoir?
What is it? What's the other name for a slaughterhouse?
Oh. Okay, got it. No, see, I like that's where your head was. I assumed I'd be some sort of like snake oil salesman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't think you'd be good at that.
Why not? I think I'm good at chatting people up.
Yeah, but we got to convince people to make decisions against their best interests.
Well, that I'd have a problem with. But what if I believed it? What if I was like, look, I went to the far Orient. I got as far as Greece.
Let's call Jordan Peterson and see what he thinks about how you'd do.
Yeah. That's true.
Pretty much.
Well, yes. Yeah. Hey, yeah. Actually, yes. I could be a Jordan Peterson back in the day.
I'm Jordan Peterson.
Yep.
So he enters this room. John Adams enters this room to meet King George. King George initially not looking at him. And I'm confused by this I have some quotes that are going to be long to read here.
I really like this scene. I thought this was really well executed.
I want to get your opinion on what you think took place here. And I want to toss it to the audience. I mean, we've got a phone number and an email address. You can email. We didn't drop this at the beginning of the show like an idiot that I am. It's info@johnadamspodcast.com and 714-576-4054. That's an email and a voice memo or a voicemail line that you can call to give your opinion on this. He walks into the room. He does his 3 separate bows at different points in the room. King George is standing next to his little chair or throne or whatever you might want to call it. There's one other dude in the room in this giant parquet floors, like a basketball court from
super
the 1970s.
Opulent. There's all these painting, the walls are painted gold.
And he does his thing. At first, King George seems to be dickish to him. And it's King George's reply to the thing I'm getting ready to read that I want to get your opinion on. But John Adams says this. It's obviously not off the top of his head. He's planned this, and he wants to make a good impression. And he's obviously intimidated as well. He says, "The United States of America have appointed me minister plenipotentiary to your majesty. I think myself more fortunate than all of my fellow citizens, and having the distinguishing honor to be the first to stand in your majesty's presence in a diplomatic character, I shall esteem myself the happiest of men if I can be instrumental in restoring the confidence and affection, or in better words, the good old nature and the good old humor between peoples who though separated by an ocean and under different governments, have the same language, similar religion, and kindred blood."
Yeah.
To which, by the way, Paul Giamatti does the lip quivering nervously while he's delivering the line, because he didn't say it as quickly as that.
Yeah.
It was choppy and nervously delivered. And then he also says this. He says, "I beg your majesty's permission to add that though I have been entrusted before by my country, it was never in my whole life in a manner more agreeable to myself." And obviously, King George, at this point, not as young as he was years before when the revolution started, not as young as he was when the troubles started with the Stamp Act and all of the missteps of the British government, miscalculating their moves. He seems to have learned from some of his mistakes. So he knows John Adams. He knows John Adams's performance in France, and he says this: The circumstances of this audience are so extraordinary. He didn't say extraordinary. He said extraordinary. Yeah. The language that you have now held is so extremely proper, and the feelings you have discovered so justly adopted to the occasion, that I not only receive with pleasure the assurance of the friendly disposition of the United States, but that I am very glad that the choice has fallen on you to be their minister. I will be very frank with you. And this is ominously delivered, this one.
Yeah.
I was the last to consent to separation. But true separation having been made and having become inevitable, I have always said, as I say now, that I would be the first to meet the friendship of the United States as an independent power. What do you think, based on how the actor delivered the lines, and based on his, do you think he was going through the motions, or do you think some of this was heartfelt?
I think he was going through the motions up until the point where, let me be frank. Right, and you can sort of tell in the performance too, because that's when he starts looking at Adams.
Yeah.
And that's when his whole demeanor changes a bit, and that is historically true too. He was the last one to consent.
Yeah,
and we talked a little bit about this last time, but we in America think about the American War of Independence as Lexington and Concord and things like that, but in reality, it was a mini world war.
Yeah,
they were fighting all the other great powers. They're fighting in India, they were fighting around the continent, they were fighting in the Caribbean, they were fighting everywhere.
One of the reasons why we won is because they were spread so thin.
Primary reason, I would argue. And, that the writing was on the wall. The British had to sue for peace in order to maintain their power, their balance of power, to not lose more than what's already been lost.
Well, because one domino falls, it'll send a signal to other colonies. What? Well, they can do it.
No, I don't know. Yes, but I think more just that the other great powers will carve England's colonial possessions.
Oh,
up.
I see. I think maybe not a secession, but conquer.
Yes.
By another power.
Yes, yeah. And I mean that happened later when the French went under their revolution. They lost all their colonial overseas. So it's a real concern. And the other part too, which they don't say in the show, but literally as soon as this happens, England and America became the primary trading partners again. Right? They needed each other.
Well, what they don't talk about this in the show, I don't believe, but the other thing that happened that is historically accurate is that the Americans boxed out the French from the treaty signing with Britain. They just left them in the dark.
Oh, yeah.
They had no idea it was happening, and then all of a sudden it was done, and they're like, "What the fuck? What about our contribution here? We helped you. And now you're leaving us in the cold." Which right on, fuck you, royal rich freaks.
Yep. And obviously, Jefferson was not pleased with that either.
Right.
which again, more foreshadowing.
So. This particular scene with him meeting King George ends beautifully because it really is kind of a retribution, or I can't think of the word, it's escaping me, but it's like he's redeemed. It's redemption for John Adams as a diplomat, because the king says to him as he's getting ready to leave, he goes, "There's an opinion among some people, Mr. Adams, that you are not the most attached of all your countrymen to the manners of France." So he's opening the door, giving John Adams a chance to shit all over France, and John Adams doesn't take the bait. This is an impromptu, extemporaneous moment. He says, "Yes, well, I vow to your majesty that I have no attachment to any country but my own." Pretty great.
Pretty great line. Do you also have the line in there that the king says about America's lack of king and what he prays for them without having a monarch?
I didn't write that one down.
So no worries. So basically that's what he says in long story short. He's, you don't have a king. Hopefully it doesn't bite you in the ass. And Adams is like, me too. One of the really interesting things about the Constitution, another just insane thing we decided to do, because the king serves as the Secretary of State, or the head of state rather, in constitutional monarchies. The president does that in most prime ministerships. We decided to combine the head of state and head of government into one guy. No other country has done that before. No other country has done that since. because that is just an insane amount of things to do.
Absolutely. Well, that's why we have the State Department is a massive organization.
Yeah, for sure. But the president's supposed to head the government and be the symbol of the government.
Yeah.
And that's gotten us into some problems, actually, as it turns out.
In recent years, too.
Yep.
So John Adams backs away. He does his stupid pomp and circumstance to get out of there.
Thinks he nailed it.
And I think he did nail it.
I think he did, too, but others didn't.
And then King George averts his gaze and just stares off into space as John Adams is doing it. And then when John Adams is outside of the room, he's like, you could tell he's like, oh, great. And he kind of peeks in, and King George is peeking back out.
Yeah.
It was a
cute scene. I thought
good scene.
I thought they handled that really well, and it was almost sympathetic to King George, right? It wasn't, I wouldn't call it sympathetic, but you could kind of see he was pained.
Yeah.
He's not, in his mind, there was a civil war that happened under his watch, and his country is much weaker as a result of it.
Yeah, and I think I don't know what the historicity of this is, but they did portray it as almost he was hurt, that he felt like he had been betrayed by people who were supposed to love him.
Yeah. Yeah,
like a little bit of
that has to be what
a sweet boy George.
Yes,
kind of situation.
Again. I keep seeing myself over and over again. I am a sweet boy, and I want everyone to know that. And when people don't treat me like I'm the sweetest boy, I get very sad.
I will tell you this though, it really does, the juxtaposition between the British and the way they act as uppity and up their own asses with their monarchy as they are. I much prefer the British over the French in the depictions of the show.
Yeah.
I was hating the French.
You were
really
you were getting very mad at that.
And I got their dirty French blood just coursing through my veins too.
Do you?
Yeah, a lot of it.
I mean, I'm a Francophile. I got to be real with you. I love the French. I love France.
Like post-revolution?
Yeah.
And now you're into Napoleon, or you're reading a lot about Napoleon.
I'm a Napoleon boy, obviously, but I just like the French. I just enjoy. Anytime I meet a French person in the wild, we tend to get along very well, and I like their food, and I like
good food. They had a head start on everybody.
They had a head start. So I mean, I'm just but yes, I do agree with you, and like that. Speaking of history, that is true. Like England was a far more liberal, country than France was at this time. Had much more representative democracy, much more.
Yeah, and the Magna Carta didn't come out of France.
Right. And
that was what 1100.
Yeah,
1066 or
there's
something.
That also, the England at this point had basically gotten rid of feudalism. It was in this kind of proto-capitalism. France was still very feudal. Mm-hmm. The haves and have-nots in France was so much worse.
Oh yeah,
so much worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see why the revolution happened in France and not England.
So they cut to John Adams reading newspapers about his visit, about his audience with the king, and he is. This is how I picture John Adams, how they depict this. And he's screaming and wailing about, they're calling me a vain and an imposter and a Pharisee of liberty. And he says, they accuse me of vanity. They always accuse me of vanity. It's like, well, look within, bro. Maybe you're vain.
Yeah, that is a wonderful, like, kind of drunk white girl line to scream. Yes. I do really like that.
And then she orders the guy who played the hot priest in Fleabag.
Yeah, he's also plays Moriarty in the new. He's an Irish actor. Plays Moriarty in the new Sherlock Holmes BBC show.
He's fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah.
He's a great actor.
Yeah.
He is the Colonel Smith, I think is his name. Yep. And Abigail orders him to just grab the papers, and he snatches the papers out of John Adams' hands and gets out of there. And that's when she starts talking to John Adams, Abigail does, about a property that's for sale in New England near their house, and that she's ready to settle down. We're getting old. I want to settle down and do something and have also, a place for the family.
And also she talks about how much she hates England.
Yeah.
Right. Another just little, like, kind of subtle nod to Jefferson as well. She loved France. She she despises England. Like,
Yeah.
we're seeing some of that little crossover.
And this is when John Adams starts bitching about having missed the Constitutional Convention, because as we talked about in earlier episodes, like he wasn't around for some of the formational periods and moments of our founding. He wasn't there for
most of them.
Yeah.
I
mean, there's so much that can be put on his shoulders and that we can thank John Adams for the founding, for the Declaration of Independence and some of that, but he wasn't there for the writing and the debate around the Constitution.
No.
And maybe, I don't know, we have an expert on, but I wonder if that's by design, because he was such a difficult character.
Yeah.
And they knew, like, let's just get the guy out of here.
Yeah, I don't know the history on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
So they cut back to smash cut. We're back in America. On the same set, it appears, that the tar and feather scene from the first episode happened. And there's this like gun salute and cannon salute, and they're welcoming him back like heroes.
There's flutes playing. There's all like American flags, and
he gets to meet his kids. Now again, they've been real fast and loose with how long he was actually gone.
It had to have been a long time, because he's no longer wearing a wig. That was the thing that really struck me. He's just he's doing the bald mullet kind of thing going on.
Yeah,
and
going forward too, the next episode.
Yeah,
it opens with them deciding what they're going to call the president.
Yeah,
and he's got, it's like George Costanza with the ponytail.
Yeah. It's a powerful look.
And so he walks to each of the kids and says hi. And this is really, here on out is where we really develop the relationship with the kids in this episode and beyond. The struggles with Charles, the bossy directive nature with JQA, with John Quincy Adams.
Yeah. JQA's little pedo adjacent 15-year-old girlfriend.
Yeah, that's right. She was 15.
Wasn't thrilled about that one.
Didn't end up marrying her though.
No,
because he was told not to.
He was told not to.
And the guy who plays John Quincy Adams as an adult is the guy who plays in The Bear. He's the cousin of the main character.
That's him?
He was also in Andor. He's one of the guys in Andor too.
I need to go
Great
back to
actor.
this. Okay, yeah, no, I love that guy.
Yeah. What's his name? Is it Ronnie in The Bear?
The one that he keeps calling cousin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The tall guy?
Tall guy, yeah.
That's him.
Okay.
John Quincy Adams.
Cool. I like that.
And it shows the range of the actor too.
Oh, for
it's
sure.
Completely different. A very serious thing, and then that
very serious,
that
very
goof guy.
subtle,
Richie. Is his name Richie?
Maybe. I don't remember. They always call him cousin. Richie does sound right though.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
And so they immediately they cut to Benjamin Rush and Adams discussing what's next, and John Adams is kind of conveying that he doesn't want to be in government. Although I think it's kind of cheeky. I don't think it's what's on his mind. I think they're playing into this at the period during the time. It was like if you wanted power and you expressed wanting to run for president or wanting political power, you were not given it because it was like gauche or something.
Well, who was the first president that actually campaigned?
I don't remember.
Was it William Henry Harrison was the first? Because before that, you were never allowed to do it. You had to always like have other people campaign on your behalf. Yeah. But I think William Henry Harrison was the first to. That's what he would have been known for. But he died, and that's what everyone actually knows him for. But he was the first one to ever actually campaign on his own behalf.
Yeah, so he's acting like he doesn't want the job, and then Benjamin Rush is saying, well, you could be vice president or whatever, and but we need men who will unite us, is what Benjamin Rush says, who's a physician and a founding father.
We have so few left of the founding generation.
Yeah, and at some point, I think it's in this scene, Abigail Adams says, well, only vice president would you accept.
Yeah.
Anything else would be beneath you.
Yeah.
That might be a quote, but it's something similar to that.
Yeah.
So, and then they cut to lunch on the porch with the family and Colonel Smith.
I love this
And
scene.
they're really, Charles is he's a booze hound.
Charles,
he is in the wine.
Charles is awesome. Of everyone we've met in the family, he's the only one I'd want to hang out with.
Yeah, he's also like an honest character. He's like he's making jokes. They're cracking down on him because apparently he got expelled, not kicked out altogether, but got in trouble at college at Harvard because he was naked out on the quad. And he's like, it's not the first time that nakedness has ever happened there. No, who cares? Whatever. And
he's like chugging wine.
Even though they're chastising him about his drunkenness and he died in, spoiler alert, he dies an alcoholic. even though they're in the middle of giving him a hard time about it, he's still just swilling the wine as fast as he can.
He's swilling it, and he does the classic, which I've done as well. The classic brother move is when you're feeling heat, he immediately puts it on his other brother.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, you think that's interesting? What about the 15-year-old or JQA is
and I don't think the age was the problem.
No, I don't
just think
so
it
either.
wasn't approved by, because they wanted him to be dealing with his career and advancement. They didn't want him distracted by romance.
Yep.
And so there's a precursor of Colonel Smith and Nabby, they call her, the daughter, kind of little sparks flying.
Little sparks fly.
But then they cut to some of the most bananas Dutch angles in the history of the show. God damn, unbelievable. Them
For
walking
like an
up this
idyllic
path.
walk.
Jeez. And they're walking up this path, John Quincy Adams and John Adams. And this is where John Adams says, pretty much orders him to break it off with the girl.
Yeah.
And you could see he is pained about it, but agrees. Okay,
yeah, says he'll give him money to start him or get him an apprenticeship in a firm. I can't remember. Or no, set up his own firm.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't do it because of the money. He did it because he's a good boy, and that's what his father wants. He's always been the good boy, and that's what he is now. And we have a scene between John Adams and Abigail where it's them talking about how John Adams didn't get elected president the first time. Mm-hmm. And it's the electoral, they actually get it wrong. She gets it wrong. I looked it up. It's 69 electoral votes for George Washington, who won, 34 electoral votes for John Adams. And he's bitching that it's an embarrassment and how can he show his face again and, just being vain and arrogant. And then 35 votes split between the next 10 candidates, 9 of which went all to John Jay. So he did exceptionally well. It wasn't like a unanimous thing for George Washington. Yeah, and again, that position was created for George Washington specifically.
Right, and he didn't run away with it.
Yeah, you're right. He didn't run. That's what I mean. That makes it even more impressive that it was that split.
What it tells me is, and this is before they were like jockeying with political parties and doing the backroom deals. He was well respected. Yeah. He was well respected. So maybe that answers the question earlier about them we got to get this guy out of here. Maybe that's not the case.
It is, look, I understand why. It is very funny to me, like back in the day where the loser became vice president and then the winner became president. Right. And I had this intrusive thought.
It's almost like they just stopped planning. All right, just make the second place guy the vice president.
No, because it was actually intentional because it was there are no parties. We all agree. This is just a contest of honorable men. We all have the exact same opinion, so it won't matter. How could it matter?
Yeah.
I had this intrusive thought of Hillary being Trump's VP, just some of those kind of if we kept that system the same, just imagining how that would work now.
Or Mitt Romney being Barack Obama.
Right.
So they cut to John Adams in a room which I believe to be the Senate because he's the president of the Senate.
Yeah,
but he hadn't yet been sworn in yet because that's what it's getting ready to happen. And again, they show John Adams nervous in a similar way that's striking me right now. I didn't even think about this. In a similar way to when he met the king, he's nervous when John Adams comes in, where he's flummoxed.
George Washington.
What did I say?
John Adams.
Yeah. George Washington comes in, and George Washington is older, very fucking distinguished. Yep. Got the great coat on, looking good.
Looks 10 feet taller than John Adams. Yeah. Just towering.
And John Adams is can't get the words out, and he's stuttering and stammering, starting to stop.
Shit. Looks like absolute shit.
Doesn't know, and goes up to George Washington, and George Washington. He's trying to get George Washington to go ahead of him, and George Washington steadies him, and no, go ahead, confident, not arrogant at all, just go ahead, almost gracious to him, settle down, it's good, go ahead. Yeah. They go out on the balcony, and they do it's not issue, it's what's the word where they administer the oath of office for the president of the United States, and I believe this is in New York. That was the first capital, right?
Yeah.
And they make him president of the United States.
I really like that he took it as softly as humanly possible. So they made it clear you couldn't hear a word he was doing.
That is true how it went down.
Yeah.
Because obviously no microphones.
No microphones.
So the guy he's I, George Washington, I'll be my town crier.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da. And then he's like, I, George Washington, just meek and mild.
Meek and mild.
Yeah. And then I love how they end the episode. It is with John Adams pretty much bawling. Like he is overcome with emotion. And
it was another time.
Great.
And also Washington again, like beckons him out to see the crowd.
Join. You're a part of this.
You're with us. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they flash to John Adams's super gross teeth.
Pretty black. Pretty black. And remember I said earlier about body horror? That's going to become another theme in this show that I am not looking forward to.
So that's how this episode went down. This is another good one.
It was another good one.
The pacing was a problem for me,
Pacing was
too.
a problem. So it had some. So I overall really liked it because it had some of the highest highs of the series for me. And some of the things I like most about the series are just kind of people in a room talking. Acted very well in an interesting way. Love that. But there are some low lows. There's some kind of dull moments in it.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think this is going to be interesting to see how the last 3 episodes
Look,
work.
I know that they're doing the show for people who aren't like us.
Yeah.
Because I would love more, lunches on the veranda where they're talking about federalism between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Just make that the show. I'm there for that.
We'll call it Lunch on the Veranda. We'll just write that play together.
So you know what I did? We'll wrap here. Hey, follow me on social media. I'm at Dollemore everywhere. Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Facebook, Blue Sky, all of them at Dollemore. Where can they find you?
I'm at Team Ian on Twitter, and that's what it'll forever be called.
Team Ian. Oh, and it is absolutely Twitter.
It's Twitter.
House.
Yeah.
I still, when I'm reading articles on YouTube, like for my show, if I see X, I just say Twitter. Like, I'm not calling it
I love
X.
when they say, a repost from X.com. It's like, oh, well, good branding, Elon.
Great.
Well done.
Fantastic. That when you go to X. When you go to Twitter.com, it comes up as the X logo.
Yeah.
That's great marketing. So I flipped on. I watched a trailer for the new Benjamin Franklin with Michael Douglas, and I'm going to give it a shot. I've heard great things about it.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Maybe we might want to do this for that.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see if we have the energy.
Yeah.
After this.
Yeah, we might take a little break and then...
Well, we'll let the show run its course.
Let it run its course. Let the audience demand... If you demand... DM Jesse.
No, don't DM.
DM Jesse.
Info. You have access to the email too. info@johnadamspodcast.com.
Well, Jesse loves when you DM.
I don't love when you DM.
He really likes it. He's playing hard to get.
It's gonna go to that other folder that I never look at. So don't DM. No one's gonna read it.
No, send the email. I think that could be fun. I'll let you be the colonist. You can get there first. Let me know how it is.
Well, the derision I feel for a little bit for Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
That would be interesting because we both have a soft spot for Adams, but like I'm coming in ready to defend my boy Franklin, and you're coming in ready to cancel him.
Also, we would have to give it some time because I think it would be difficult to come off of the Tom Wilkinson Ben Franklin.
Yeah,
into that's
one. That's not fair. For
sure.
Michael Douglas is a fine actor. I have nothing against him.
Sure,
but that Tom Wilkinson just chewed the scenery.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would love your thoughts. Again, the email address is info@johnadamspodcast.com. There's so many email addresses floating around in my head, it's hard to get them out. I'm right now John Adams flummoxed in front of royalty.
Yeah.
You're royalty.
I have that effect on
English
people. I
lineage.
am. No,
you can also call, leave a voicemail, 714-576-4054. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us this time. I am your host. This is your other host,
Ian Brinksman. Always a pleasure.
And we will see you on episode 5. I don't know the name of it because I'm not running ahead.
No,
so.
no. You'll learn when we learn.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.